Hi, this is Leo Gray on behalf of Kristen Olson's Urban Yoga Center in Palm Springs. Visit us online at urbanyoga.org or on Facebook at Kristen Olson's Urban Yoga Center to check out the schedule of classes offered online and in person or hybrid. And stop by the tip jar to make donations to support these online classes that we have live on Zoom and later on YouTube. And today I don't have any Zoom participants for this scheduled class. So what we do is make a shorter video for YouTube because our friends who use our YouTube videos like to have the option of shorter practice times. So today I will be talking about Sthira and Sukha. These are two Sanskrit words. And if you know my classes, you know I don't use the Sanskrit that often. So to put it in English, Sthira is strength and Sukha is ease. And these two things are one of the pairs of things that we unite or synchronize or integrate in yoga, the way we integrate breath and movement, the way that we integrate mind, body, spirit. Yoga means to yoke is one of the meanings of the word, to tie together. So just talk a bit about how and why we need both strength and ease, and some examples of where we can use them. And for me, interwoven with all this is what I learned of the Alexander technique in my yoga teacher training and in a couple of years afterwards, and some other work I did with my Alexander teacher, Cecile Rayner. She's also on Facebook and elsewhere on the web. You can find great things that she has to offer. She has webinars, and a lot of times she has free offerings. So one thing that I will talk about first is stacking joints. And I'm going to turn just to give an example. Now, stacking joints, you might think of it when you're in table pose or in standing poses, but even in easy seated pose, the best use of the body, to put it in Cecile's terms, is stacking the joints for stability, for comfort. So my shoulders are above my hips. These are the joints in question here for this example, in easy seated pose. So strength and ease. I'm sitting tall, but I'm not sitting rigidly or stiffly. And it's easier on my muscles if I have these two biggest pairs of joints, by the way, the shoulders and the hips. The hips, the biggest joints in the body, and the shoulders, the second. So sitting with shoulders above hips is stable. It's easier for my body to be upright. Not like this. This is rigid. This is me over-efforting, misusing the body in Alexander terms. And then this is ease. Now this is strong, but this is rigid. This is easeful. And in both versions of easy seated pose, you could be easy seated pose and easier seated pose, I guess. In both versions, shoulders are above hips, but here my body is more at ease, more at rest. And sure, sometimes we like to play with more challenging postures and movements. And there we have maybe less ease and more strength, but there should always be ease, no matter how challenging the posture or movement we're working on is. And there should always be strength, no matter how easeful the movement or posture is that we're dealing with. So to move to more obvious examples, I want to talk about something that I don't like to describe things in terms of right or wrong. I see a lot of practitioners doing things in a way that's different from what I learned. And I'll talk about folding forward and coming back out of forward fold. So I see a lot of this when I watch other yoga videos or when I see other people in a class sometimes. This is what I don't do. This is me demonstrating what I learned is not great for my body. And I'm going to do this carefully and mindfully listening to my body. But people bend at the waist. See, my legs are rigid here and not moving. And maybe it looks pretty. I'm sure there's a reason people learn it that way. But this is what's referred to as a false hinge. There is no hinge in my waist. This is the crest of my hip bone, my pelvis. So if you look at a skeleton, there's nothing here to bend. There are vertebrae here, but there's not a hinge. The hip sockets are a hinge. It's a ball and socket joint, and this is where the bending forward can take place in a more easeful and healthy and stabler way. And I think it's stable to have our legs rigid, and to a degree, this is stable. But actually, a more stable leg is a leg that has some movement to it, some bounce and flex. So joints are stacked, hips above knees, above ankles. That's stability. But when I bend like this, using my legs instead of my back, see, then my hips don't remain above my knees and ankles. Things move around, and that's okay. My ankles are still pretty much on the hips. So we come to the half lift, and then those three sets of joints are stacked up again. But see, the legs are stronger than the back too. This is another thing to keep in mind. So these muscles in the legs and the glutes that help us stand are way stronger than these muscles in the lower back. So let the stronger ones do more work. So when we fold forward, we let all those leg joints soften. So the legs are doing the work. The back is pretty much at rest or doing less work, to be more accurately. So this, I never do this unless I'm giving this example of what I don't do. And see also, my legs feel tight. So it's not just about how much they're doing, but the feeling, right? This feels better in the legs. This movement, this flexing, helps me ease out excess tension. We all carry excess tension to different degrees in different places. And coming up like this, that's all back, that's all core muscles. And I have very strong core muscles. I work on that a lot, balance. But they're never going to be, no matter what I do for my core, my legs will always be stronger than my core. And that goes for anybody. It's basic fact of our anatomy. The legs are stronger. And keeping ease in the legs can help us in more challenging postures. So tree pose, for example. Now, in some disciplines of yoga, some schools of yoga, for example, Bikram, they give cues in tree pose where they will cue to the standing leg and say, leg like iron. And you'll see someone when they go from like a soft leg to a locked leg. And again, a locked leg seems stronger, but there's a lack of ease there. There's a lack of flexibility, letting the knee remain soft and bouncy, responsive. Think of like a shock absorber on your bicycle or your car. So I can keep my leg locked and come into tree. And there's some steadiness, but also there's, it doesn't last long, see, because I'm not used to doing it in that way. And it's a better use of my body to let the joints go soft. Now as I wobble, and we always wobble, all the trees move. As I wobble, the knee moves, the ankle, the hip. And sure, I can let my foot down and start over anytime. That's an important thing to remember too. Change legs. Rigid leg. You can only do this for so long too. Another thing about locking your leg, when you lock your knee like this and you're standing, whether it's on one foot or both feet, locking that knee joint inhibits circulation in the back of the knee. You can actually pass out by locking your knees too long, you can faint. Think of like a soldier standing at attention or standing outside, standing with rigid knees for too long, you can lose consciousness, and then that can lead to other injury as you crash to the mat. So soft knees. You can stand pretty still and upright and still have ease. There's ease here in my knee, there's ease here in my ankle, in my hip. Now, I learned a lot about this learning from my Alexander teacher, Sthira, Utkatasana, chair pose, which chair pose looks
like this. If you've taken some yoga classes, probably know chair pose. It's also called lightning bolt sometimes, or intense pose. And because I've learned to release downward, there's no rigidity here in my legs, my hips. And many people find this a very grueling or arduous pose. And because of the way I learned it, I can stand in this pose and talk and talk and talk. And what I'm doing in my body is releasing down into the floor, or doing in my mind and I'm thinking, release, release, release. We can do it for quite a while, and we can explore variations. We can come into twists from here, or do different arm movements in the legs. They're not rigid, they're responsive. I can bend more or less. And use the leg muscles to come in, not the back muscles. So the water, even with these, it's hot and humid here. Even when we practice these, we get thirsty. Another thing, I talked about the false hinge of the waist and hinge of the hips. So with chair pose, Cecile had taught me to cue and to think about my hip sockets. So your hip sockets are here, just to either side of your pubic bone. And if you press there with your thumbs, you kind of feel like releasing the parking brake on your car. And so you can sort of start to teach your body this more easeful way of coming into chair by pressing your thumbs into those hip sockets and think release, release, release. So I'm releasing in the front of my hips, in the back of my knees, the front of my ankles. And you could come into the posture in the lower body and then bring up the arms. And another way that we come into this, we can come down here again with nice soft legs, let the arms swing. So this gets those joints all flexing and bouncing, and let the weight of the arms bring you up into the posture. And I'm still thinking release, release, release down into the floor. And just one more example. Building up to more and more challenging, right? Warrior three. Now, the most easeful way to come to warrior three that I know of is to have your hands on blocks standing up tall, have your hand on the wall or a piece of furniture. But another way is to come from a lunge and press off the back foot to kind of pop forward. Bringing the tips of the torso and the back leg are perpendicular to the ground. No, parallel to the wrong P word, the other P word. So as many bounces as it takes. And I think of reaching back and making a footprint on the wall. So the standing leg, see, this ankle, this knee, this hip, they're all soft. I'm releasing in the part of the hip. I'm definitely strengthening this leg and strengthening my core. And yes, it makes it harder to talk. It's a good amount of effort, but there's ease. And with practice, with integrating strength and ease, you can play around with variation like this. I can stay parallel to the ground and do things like this. And of course, here too, you can play with other arm variations, maybe take a pocket. And of course, you can come out of the pose and start over in Sthira, strength, and Sukha, ease. And here, I could lock my leg, sure. Right away, that feels less steady. It's not very comfortable. I'm going to stop doing it. When demonstrating what not to do, it's important to limit it and to keep listening to the body. Look at how red and flushed it is now. So it's progression. The more strength I'm employing, the less ease there is, but there's always both. When we think of balance, balance is not a static thing like a scale, where you have an item here and you have weights here and they come to stillness. Balance is more like the part before they come to stillness. So the strength and ease always go up and down, just like the yogi entry, or warrior three, or chair. There's always a movement, there's always some motion going. And thank you for tuning in to our YouTube today and joining me for this shorter segment. I hope you find it helpful. See you next. Namaste.